Richard, thank you for your conference and to be exquisite with the time. So, the next speaker, it's Annelies del Boer, que ens parlarà de l'ètica dels assajos clínics en els països en vies de desenvolupament.
How do I get to my presentation? Escape? Okay. No. Oh, there I am.
Yes.
Okay, good evening. Thank you very much for inviting me. I work for a Dutch organization called WEMOS. I've already been introduced, so I'll keep that very brief. We've been working on clinical trials in developing countries for a couple of years now. Through partner organizations that we are working with, we came to know that a lot of the drugs that we are using in the European Union are being tested on people in developing countries. To us, that was a cause of concern, as we know that people in developing countries do not have proper access to drugs, and they are less well protected than trial subjects in Europe. The reason for this shift to developing countries and low-income countries is first and foremost that drugs can be tested more cheaply over there. It's easier to find people willing to participate in clinical trials, as it is for them, as I mentioned, sometimes the only way for them to access treatment and drugs. Popular destinations of clinical trials in developing countries are Eastern Europe, Asia, countries such as India and China, and Central and South America. A lot of times, and I think that is one of the reasons why we are involved in this, is that these drugs that are tested in developing countries are not being primarily tested for those countries, for use in those countries, but they are tested to be used on Western markets. As I said before, the reasons why they do it, it's cheaper to carry out clinical trials in developing and low-income countries. It's easier to find test subjects. Also, there is the issue of people in developing countries being treatment naive. This means that they've not been subjected to a lot of drug use, which means that the outcomes of the trials are clearer than it would have been if you carry them out on people in the West who've been subjected to multiple drug use. And for governments, there's a lot of economic benefits to have drugs tested in developing countries. We see, for example, now that the Indian government is relaxing its laws and regulations in order to attract clinical trials from the West to be carried out in India. The problem with the issue that we're working on, it's very hard to get exact figures on how many clinical trials are being carried out in developing countries. And that relates to the story that Richard has highlighted earlier. It's very hard to find out how many clinical trials are being carried out in which country. And of course, it's very difficult to know exactly how many of those clinical trials are being carried out unethically. However, CEOs of big pharmaceutical companies such as GlaxoSmithKline, Wyeth, and Merck have stated in public addresses that between 29 and sometimes even some of them even 70% of the clinical trials are being carried out outside Western countries, so outside Europe and Latin America. Some scientists estimate that about 40% of the clinical trials are being carried out in non-traditional research areas. The problem is that at this moment, as Richard has already highlighted, registration is very complicated. For example, in the Netherlands you have one obligatory registration system, but that's not accessible to the public, and you have a registration database that is not obligatory and that is open to the public. In a lot of countries, there's no registration system, or it's not open to the public, so it's very hard to find out how many clinical trials are being carried out where. We work together with an organization that did some research into ethics of clinical trials in developing countries. And, they found that trial sponsors, such as pharmaceutical companies, do not always follow ethical guidelines when they carry out clinical trials. Relevant legislation, for example, is the Declaration of Helsinki and Guidelines for Good Clinical Practice. The European Union has clinical trials directives meant to protect subjects of clinical trials. Several very important issues of the Declaration of Helsinki is that a test subject should be well informed of the risks of a clinical trial somebody is participating in. A trial participant has to give its voluntary consent, and people, according to the Declaration of Helsinki, should be guaranteed post-trial treatment.